Welcome to Masters of Momentum. I am your host, Sharika Hines.
I'm your co-host, Roquita Coleman-Williams.
On today's episode, we're going to be talking about post-election recovery and resilience. Why are we talking about this today, Roquita?
Look, in most public elections, there is a heightened sense of divisiveness and contentiousness after most elections. After the last ones we've experienced through the past 12 months, we've seen that double up. So we're here to talk about how do organizations, municipal leaders, nonprofit leaders, how do they respond in order to start working on reconciliation and resilience in these very important times.
That's so good. And that is why we have our very special guest, TaJuan Stout Mitchell, who is a longtime community leader, advocate, and also, listen, let me tell you something. Not only is Ms. TaJuan Stout Mitchell all things public service, she is also all things mentoring and help leading our community forward. Hey, Ms. TaJuan, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Rebounding.
Rebounding. We are so happy to have you here today. These R's seem to be the theme for today. Recovery, resilience, rebounding, all the things. Ms. TaJuan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am lifelong Memphian. Grew up in the public schools here in Memphis, Tennessee. Graduate of Southside High School, go Southside, Scrappers, in the 70s, in a turbulent time when we lost one of our national African-American leaders, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I graduated from HBCU, Lane College in Jackson, Tennessee, where I not only was the vice president of student government, but also very active, involved in civil rights movement from afar while in school. Dr. Lasumba Gray always teases me about I was the rebel that couldn't sit down, and I probably am still that rebel trying to fight for justice, equality, and balance it with mercy. I got a master's degree in education. Never really wanted to teach, but I knew that I'm from a family of teachers. My mother was a teacher. My grandmother was a teacher. My grandfather helped build a school in Starksville, Mississippi. It was a log cabin school because his kids were walking too far from school.
Wow.
Yeah. So I have a lifelong passion for education based on a legacy of family members who've devoted their careers and lives to education. I ran for school board. I ran against 4 opponents my first time. It was my first time running. Nobody really knew my name. I remember laughing and saying, just vote for the longest name on the ballot. And before I knew it, I had well, I'm a little old lady now, but little old ladies going to the polls saying, I'm looking for that longest name on the ballot.
Wow.
And we won. I tried to do some meaningful things while I was at the Board of Education, like school choice, to give parents an opportunity to select what school your child or you wanted your child to attend if there was availability. There was a time when you could only go to the assigned school in your neighborhood. Well, that didn't make sense to me as a working mother. We're working all across this city, traveling to and far. And if you can be close to your children and drop them off and go to work, that made sense to me. Then I worked on making sure that African American history was taught in our public schools in Memphis. That was important to me because our children need to know who they are and from where they came. And always think, people have a tendency to say, oh, we were slaves. No, you were enslaved. That is a process of something someone does to you, but you were never a slave. You were far from that. You were brought from places that where you were kings and queens were. And that we are brilliant, that we have contributed to this American economy and this American life. The labor of this land was built on our backs.
Absolutely.
and our scars. And so we have a vested interest, and we should always keep a vested interest.
It is with that reason why we invited you today, because of this rich history that you have, and we're also interested in learning more about the 4 different mayors that you served. But before we get into that, let me ask a question. Reflecting on the types of experiences that you just talked about in education, in your family, coming from these legacies, these rich histories, reflecting on your political career, can you share an instance where you navigated a challenging post-election period, and what strategies did you employ for yourself, and what advice did you give the communities to move them forward?
You know, I'll be very honest with you. In 1991, I was elected to the school board, and we also elected our first Black mayor.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a time when our city was divided
Yes.
politically down racial lines.
Okay.
And it was a time when nobody had a blueprint of Black leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was important that we set an example with high standards of decorum and policy making, that we be well read and versed on the issues of the day,
Mm-hmm.
and that we communicate, because we didn't have social media, y'all,
Yeah.
Yes.
but we had town hall meetings, neighborhood gatherings, church meetings, that we be visible
Okay.
and able to articulate the issues that were confronting our community and the strategies that we employ to tackle them.
You just said something really important. You talked about making sure that we had the accurate information, that we were well read, that we were well versed in policies and the issues of the day. Given now that social media has given everyone, even the underinformed and ill-informed, access to spread information, unfortunately, even if that's misinformation, how do you, as a community leader, feel like we can combat that in today's time?
You know, what really concerns me, I love social media, and you know,
Yeah, listen, you do much better than me, because
at
I am
72,
horrible.
I'm probably a social media queen. I'm
And,
She
probably the
is.
and she photographs well.
And
The queen
beauty.
photographs
Listen, we
well,
are all
honey.
just trying to.
and I think that the kids would say, Grandmama needs to get off social media. But I love social media and what it has the opportunity to do to bring us together and keep us informed. What I hate about social media, it's not social media, the technique and technology.
Yeah.
What I hate is that we sometimes reduce ourselves to the lowest point in talking about an issue. We don't stay on the point. We start, instead of talking about the policy and possibilities for change, we start talking about personalities. And yes, the P versus the P. And I think that's sometimes to our detriment. I also think that we sometimes run with gossip rather than seek out facts.
Yeah.
And I have a habit. Well, and this is because of my daughter, who's a journalist. She always says, "Mama, did you research that before you?" And I try to do that,
Yeah.
and that is one of the things that I think that help us bridge the divide when Black leadership took the school board, the city council, the mayor's seat, and then not long after the county commission. But it was that race, and I think everybody wanted to make sure that we always gave good information, and our newspaper was viable.
Those are very good points. That raises a lot of concern and question around how did you build consensusship and bridge the divide during that time, and what's some of the elements that we can bring forward today in rebuilding community, and what do the elements look like for us to?
Now, you know, at that time, I would say that we have social media now, but at that time we had editorials from the Commercial Appeal and Memphis Press Senator, and you saw elected officials writing more and giving their positions and statements on issues,
Wow.
and being asked by the editorial board to do so, to come down to talk to a broad range of citizens, not in the public, but just at a coffee table about and chairs about
Mm-hmm.
issues and why they're taking these approaches and challenge that thinking.
So a nonpartisan,
That's right.
they had a voice. They had
That's
a
right.
nonpartisan platform and framework
Mhm.
to get out important facts and positions that we have, not
And
so
to
much
hear
so today.
yourself and to realize that maybe I need to slant my position based on some good information you've given me.
Mm-hmm.
So feedback from the public that
Yes.
that's actionable.
Right.
Yes.
So actionable feedback from the public.
I'll give you an example of
Mhm.
that. Let me give you an example of that. There was a big controversy about bringing the Grizzlies to Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
And people really, literally
I remember this.
said that they were going to vote us out of office if we did it. They were going to attack us in our homes. We had
This is when you were on the city council,
on the
to
city
clarify.
council.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a bad, bad situation.
Mm-hmm.
And people were scared.
Yes.
But I love the fact that I brought people from my district into City Hall and the players, pro and con,
Mm-hmm.
the bringing Memphis Grizzlies to town, and allowed them an opportunity to debate each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then my constituents or neighborhood leaders ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
And through that process, I said to one of the main players, one of the issues that came out was that I'm paying for an arena that I'll never sit in.
Oh gosh.
And those were from older people.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to feel their pain from that.
Right.
And I'm sorry. And they were right.
Mm-hmm.
And so immediately I said to the city attorney, is there a way that we can make sure that does not happen?
And their concern was about not being able to afford tickets, right?
right.
Because they were on fixed
And
income.
they did not feel it was fair for them to have to pay
Mm-hmm.
an extra tax to build a building
That they couldn't access.
that they probably wouldn't access.
Mm-hmm.
And so Robert Spence with some of the members of the team that was working on that issue from the community, they came up with a brilliant plan to tax the ticket.
That's good. So here's what I just heard you say.
So there's a surcharge on the ticket that pays for the
that
arena.
pays for the arena, so then they can offer tickets that were more price friendly.
And you wouldn't hurt people on fixed incomes
Yeah.
who felt like they may never attend those sporting events. Now, they may have attended some sporting events, but then you've made a choice to do so, and the surcharge is on the ticket.
Yeah.
And that helped a lot had we not had discussion
Mhm.
as a community,
Right.
we would not have identified issues that we could probably tackle.
Here's what I heard you say in this process, because it's really important to point this out. Number one, you all made yourself, elected officials made themselves responsible for being educated on the issues,
Yes.
both sides, pros and cons. And number two, I heard you say that they had to take ownership of their positions on the issues in these editorials, because they would answer questions from journalists, they would do articles and op-eds about them. Then I heard you say they would bring community into the conversation so that they could hear their concerns, and also you brought the opposing side together so that you could hear the cons, and you were always open to slanting your position to meet the needs of the public and the greater good.
You got to hear the cries of the public that you serve. It does not mean you always have to give them exactly what they want. Now, I'm just going to be honest with you. Somebody's going to always walk away feeling disappointed.
Yeah.
But you really try to find where there is a reasonable issue and how we can address it to eliminate that issue. How can I take more of the issues off the table? there may be still an issue left on the table
Mm-hmm.
that you can't avoid.
Right.
Absolutely.
But you have to show good faith effort that I'm trying to respond to the people I represent.
Yeah. And I love that. I love that you have connected the dots between we've got to start working together. We've got to find common places of interest, and we've got to find our way forward by hearing both sides, with everyone coming to the table, knowing that I may have to move a little bit so that we can move our community forward. This reminds me of a statement that you often say to me and remind me about your time with your father, is that when you all would have an argument in the household, that he would say, "Don't get loud, improve your argument."
My mother is a retired teacher,
Mhm.
and unfortunately, my mother was a screamer. So she screamed a lot at us. You know, out of get those dishes. I told you an hour to go to get those dishes, and so I learned that high pitched voice from my mother when I get excited about something. And sometimes I would debate my dad. I really got my love for my politics from my dad. I'll tell you about that story, but.
I can't wait.
But my dad, when we would debate an issue, I would start a high pitched voice. I don't know if it just reminded him of my mama, or and he didn't want to hear it, or he was trying to help me. But I think he was trying to help me because he always said, "Don't raise your voice. Improve your argument."
Oh gosh, what
It's
a
that
fantastic
powerful
leadership
advice.
lesson.
Exactly. Don't raise your voice, improve your argument, which is a
right.
lot of what we see on social media, right? When people going back, they're not even debating the points anymore, right?
Yeah.
The facts. They're debating personalities. And that was an earlier point.
I also
that you
got
raised.
another nugget from a well-known leader and genius of your generation that I take with me. Don't talk about what you're going to do. Do it.
Who is this leader?
Beyonce.
Okay, Beehive fans, we had to drop that one in there. Okay.
So
Okay.
and there is power in moving in silence and
Yeah.
working out your plan before you reveal the plan.
That's good. Stop talking
Absolutely.
about what you're going to do. Get the facts together, get a real plan together and strategy. And don't just do these things in a silo. You need to invite other voices in, voices that are on the same side as you to strengthen your argument, and voices on the opposing side so that you can hear what the opposition is, so you can strengthen your position or perhaps maybe move yourself on that point. I'd like to shift us to another question. Post-election periods can often lead to heightened polarization. What practical steps can community leaders, much like yourself, take to bridge divides and promote unity amongst candidates, constituents with political views?
Oh,
With different political views.
with different political views. I like a strategy that Mayor Paul Young is employing right now. He has roundtable discussions
Yep.
with stakeholders.
Yeah, there's one Thursday and Friday.
Yeah. And that's important because you bring people together from different walks of life. You share issues with them. You get feedback. Now, everybody can't sit at the round table, I know.
Right.
But it serves a community well when great minds come together with some synergy and understanding of certain issues in his plan. It will serve us well in his planning. It doesn't mean that he has to take anything that they said, but that synergy and that energy of bringing them together with diverse backgrounds and minds and formulating policies based on the technical knowledge of each individual has got to put him in a better position to lead.
And you know what that requires? No ego.
It really does.
Yes, one of the
It
things
really
that we try to
does.
make sure at Polish that we're communicating to our leaders whenever we're doing executive coaching or we're hosting forums is don't want to be right. You have to want to win for the greater good. And that is a hard lesson for a lot of people to digest.
And you've got to want to, leadership has to be humble.
Yes, it
Yes.
does. Yes. That's
Humble.
true.
Humility is a challenge because as you amass power and influence,
Mhm.
oftentimes the circles, the voices that you're hearing are more aligned with your own.
Mhm.
And so you do have better chance for groupthink.
Mhm.
You've talked about a couple of the leadership lessons, one from your father,
Mhm.
leadership lessons that you've drawn from the B.
From the beehive.
What other leadership lessons would you give younger politicians who are making a transition during this very, very difficult time?
You know, this is probably the most challenging period that I've ever seen. And I have worked for 4 mayors. I've served 3 terms on the city council. I've worked for Republican and Democratic mayors. But what we're facing now with the rollback of an attitude to be inclusive to an attitude we don't need that anymore. When and an attitude of taking from the least and sharing it with the most. It's going to be a real challenge for us. And I'll be honest with you, we don't have room for petty politics now. We don't have room for a lack of unity on some of these issues. And even though there will be some battles in communities that you have to fight, I always say you can't allow one decision to warp your thinking about ever working together as a community
That's
again.
good. I'm glad you said that, Ms. Tajuan, because we have done a lot of work together. You happen to, also be a really good friend and mentor of mine. So I'm fortunate in that way. But I've watched you work alongside people that are, have a different political opinion and view of yours. I've seen you have friends and you guys come together on issues. What I'd like to ask you is, in this vein of talking about this is no time for petty politics, what would you say to those young political leaders or leaders in general who feel like perhaps maybe sitting down at a table talking to the opposing side is somehow another them selling out, or and how do they sit at these tables and still maintain integrity of self?
I think we just tend to forget that a city, a state, and a nation doesn't belong to one group.
Yeah.
We all live here as a community. And so when I even think of, I serve with Brent Taylor, who is very conservative. Very, and I consider him a dear friend and a longtime associate because we work together so often. But I can say to him, now, I think so-and-so, what you're doing is a mess. But have you thought about this?
Yes.
I like what you did here, but I think here is your problem
Right.
that you may want to consider. And he does the same thing with me. If I can say that to him, I have to be open up and allow him to say that to me. And then it makes me go back and think about my positions.
Yeah.
So keep dialogues open.
Yeah.
And it's not a sellout to hear the other side. It's a sellout when you void all your principles.
Yeah.
And
I'm
lose
here-
your integrity
Yeah.
for your position, that you don't know your position anymore because you've taken somebody
Or you
else's.
lose your integrity for your position because you don't know your position anymore.
That is
Yeah.
critical. We talk about this at home. I do this work so often that I have to take leadership principles into the house, especially with my husband and my son, who are both very passionate humans. And I tell my 12-year-old, when you think dad's wrong, it's better to lead with curiosity. Ask him from where he's getting his information.
That's true.
Mhm.
Ask him to show you that it's in scripture.
Mhm.
Ask him to give you information as to where you can go do your own research as
That's right.
opposed to fighting with him.
That's right.
Because the minute you let the words come out of your mouth, you are wrong, you activate the fight.
You really do.
You activate the fight. Instead, if you ask a question, you lean in with curiosity and you can lead him with curiosity. And he's like, how do I lead dad? He's a grown up and I'm a kid. I said, the next time you think dad's making a position that's flawed, lead with curiosity and see what happens. At 12, you can lead a 50-year-old
You really
dad
can. You really
into
can.
curiosity rather than into a fight.
It's about your response, and you control your response. And so when we talk about petty politics and getting pulled in, one of the things that it would benefit us all to remember is no one makes you do anything.
Absolutely.
You
We're
are
not
responsible for
your
yourself
reaction.
and your reaction.
You're responsible
Exactly.
for your reaction.
Now, Mr. One, I'd like to ask
Dr.
you.
Martin Luther King
Uh-huh.
once said, they can't ride your back unless you've been over.
My
Oh.
goodness, we have to pause for the call. They can't ride your back unless you've been over.
All right.
Stand up straight.
Caption of the day.
Well, now having said that, and we're talking about posture, let's move into some well care. This work
Yes.
can be taxing for someone like yourself who has definitely given a great deal of your life to the community at will and with pleasure to do so. How do you say post-election recovery? How are you maintaining your own personal resilience and doing that through a lens of through wellness? How are you caring for yourself?
You know, this role of public service can really confuse you quickly about associates and friends, and they are different.
Mm-hmm. Oh, goodness.
Associates may have an agenda.
I'm tracking.
Friends have your interests.
Associates may have an agenda. Friends have your interest. Okay.
I'm tracking.
Best interest at heart, and you have
Best
theirs.
interest at heart.
And same thing with family. So I try to recognize that although I know a lot of people, I have a small circle of friends.
Yes.
And I value that time with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to give that time when I'm with them totally to them. And I love my family. I was blessed with a blended family. I have a 34-year marriage, 4 children, 7 grandchildren, and 2 great-grands.
Congratulations
Yeah.
on that legacy.
Exactly.
Congratulations.
Yes.
And
Ugh.
trying to put a blended family together, I
Mhm.
promise you, is not easy. But it has been totally a blessing, even the journey of it.
Yes.
Even the journey of it. And so I try to find ways that I do nothing for my care, but spend time with family, friends, and then time with God and myself.
That's good. So good.
Well, I have to personally say I'm a little bit of a science nerd. I like to understand the biology of wellness. I was reading something this week, and it occurred to me that, God, our creator of the universe, evolved grandmamas. Evolved grandmamas. We're the only species in all of this universe that gets to have another half of life after we're unable to reproduce. And so I find that, I look at grandmotherhood. I'm a new grandmother. I look at grandmotherhood very differently today than I did before, not as a task or a chore, but as if I'm here, if God gave me 50 more years to be here, what is that responsibility? And it's to teach.
It's the
And to share knowledge and to help them to grow.
And you're going to be surprised about something else too, and you too. And I learned this along the way. Now, my husband, praise the Lord, thank you so much for him,
We love Mr.
was always involved on the floor playing with the kids, daddy.
Yes.
That was never my style, But he loved that. He did that well. Camping, teaching them how to swim, playing football in the backyard. My best years with my kids have been empowering them as adults,
Oh, that's amazing.
That is.
helping them to grow wings.
Yeah.
And I think I've enjoyed that part. So it's a process, too, of finding out okay, what's your niche and what's his?
Mhm.
And not be ashamed of. You know, I baked some cookies with the girls and everything with my son too. But I know that he was better at that than I was.
Mhm.
But I really think I got this adulting parenting down. And I don't think people realize that you never stop being parents.
You don't.
No,
You
you
don't.
don't.
Mm-mm.
You do
I would
not.
agree.
Mhm.
Well, listen, that leads me into probably one of my final questions. Beyond immediate post election concerns, what immediate strategies do you believe are essential for sustaining well being and resilience
You
in our
know,
community?
I am working with a group of women now.
Mhm.
We have had one Zoom call we talked about our feelings after the election and how do we move from here? What do we do? And in the process, and they're waiting for their second Zoom call, and it's coming. I'm working on a national speaker for them. But in the process of thinking about that, I have involved myself with Win with Black Women, an organization.
Okay.
And so I've been on their Zoom calls, and I've been thinking, how can I move this group into the initiatives of the national group?
Okay.
There is no need for us to always invent the wheel.
That's so
Yes.
true.
Sometimes we need to latch on.
Partnership.
That's right, and
Strategic
collaboration.
collaborations.
And so this group, this national group, has a state Win with Black Women, and it's just a matter of discussing issues and deciding strategies and then employing those strategies from state to state.
Yeah.
And that's how I decided to spend my time in rebelling, because it's going to tell us who support our causes. So be vigilant and shop with people who support your causes. It will also tell us who we need to support and where our interests align. So as we get ready to vote in another election on state, on national levels, we all, even if we can't vote for the person, I can send them a little chunk of change in my government check. Social Security.
You can support.
That's good.
I can support.
Well, we have certainly gotten some really good practical advice about how we can apply and move the needle forward and move ourselves forward post election. What I'd like to ask you is to speak directly to your camera, which is
You have
right
to.
here.
Okay.
And I'd like for you to speak to the leader, whether they are a community leader, young, old, or whatever, who finds themselves right now paralyzed post election. And talk to them about how they can regain momentum and move their community and themselves forward.
I always say that so many have invested so much to get us where we are today. We cannot afford, every generation has an opportunity to move the needle further, closer to the goal. I don't even think there's a finish line in this race of humanity that we have, because problems and issues evolve into other problems and issues. But always be vigilant. No, it won't always work out our way, but we must continue to push forward. Find you a group. Start small. Measure your progress with that group. But don't sit on the sidelines and don't quit. The generations to come will suffer or benefit from what you don't do or what you choose to do.
That's so good.
Get involved. and people think it has to be big. You got to run for office. No, you don't. Everybody's not meant to run for office. Some people are meant to phone bank. Some people are meant to fundraise. Some people are meant to be activists. Some people are meant to just be in the crowd. My mother used to always say, one of my dearest friends while I was on school board was Maxine Smith. And Maxine Smith once said, now, how do I know your mother? And my mother told her, well, I was a teacher, but you don't know me. I was in the crowd.
Mm. Wow. Which speaks to one of our graduates from our Memphis Academy of Civic Engagement program, Mr. Juan, who said to us that all of us should find ourselves being seen serving and not serving to be seen.
That's right. And you can't go anywhere. You can't move anything if you're out there by yourself. You need a crowd. Who was that who said, if you are alone, it's not a march, it's a stroll. And that's so true.
Very true. I agree. Well, thank you so much for joining
very
us
welcome.
today, Ms. TaJuan. Thank you so much for being with us today. I am your host, Sharika Himes.
I am Raquita Williams.
Thank you for joining Masters of Momentum. Be the change that we want to see in the world. Catch the wave. Be the momentum. We'll see you next time.